I discovered a haunted cave where my only light vanished 1,000 feet in. I never should have opened that door. The moment I pushed it, I felt a chill race down my spine. My heart hammered in my chest. It was like the very air thickened, squeezing the breath from my lungs. I stood there, eyes wide, staring into the abyss of darkness beyond. It looked so innocent, just a small hole in the wall of an old, forgotten barn, but I felt it. I felt the dread creeping in, wrapping around me like a cold blanket. Just hours earlier, I had been driving along the winding back roads of my little town. Blue skies, warm sun, a typical Saturday. I was searching for adventure, a break from routine. I had heard whispers, tales of a hidden cave nearby, stories that danced on the lips of thrill-seekers and shook heads of the hometown skeptics. I wanted to see it. I wanted to believe. But this was something else. The air smelled damp and metallic, the kind of scent that mixes with fear and sets your nerves on fire. I stepped inside, and the faint light from my phone barely split the thick darkness. Shadows loomed, reaching out like ghostly fingers. I reached for the switch on my flashlight, its beam flickering to life only to sputter and die just moments later. I cursed under my breath. I shouldn't have come here. The cave stretched out ahead of me, infinite and hungry. A low whisper seemed to echo off the walls, clawing its way into my mind. Keep going, my skin prickled with every footstep. I felt like I was being pulled deeper, like the cave was alive, a creature wrapping its cold claws around my sanity. Strange noises bounced off the walls. Scratches, like fingernails on stone, mingled with distant whispers. Did I imagine it? Every heartbeat felt like a warning. My phone glowed for a moment longer, illuminating a jagged rock formation that resembled a chilling face, twisted with agony. I stepped back, panic flooding my veins. My breath quickened, I could taste fear on my tongue. Then came the shifting of stones, a scrape far behind me, swift like a predator stalking its prey. I turned, heart racing, but saw nothing. Only a suffocating darkness that swallowed sound. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My palms were sweaty, trembling now. I wanted to scream, but the echo swallowed it. I took one more step. A shudder traveled through the ground, vibrating through my bones. Something chuckled in the shadows, a sickening sound that set my mind alight with dread. I turned again, desperation clawing at my throat. I needed to leave. I needed to find the light. But there it was, a dark figure lurking at the far end of the cave, cloaked in shadows. It began to glide toward me, silently, a nightmare come to life. I opened my mouth to scream. But everything went black. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I awoke to a damp chill wrapping around me, an almost tangible darkness that held its breath in anticipation. The panic surged like a freezing tide, threatening to pull me under. My eyes flew open, and a wave of confusion washed over me. I was back on the cave floor, the jagged rocks biting into my side, but the terrifying figure was gone. I forced myself to sit up, the low luminescence of my phone flickering dimly at my side, illuminating nothing but the oppressive stone walls. A labyrinth of shadows seemed to shift just beyond my peripheral vision, whispering secrets I could not decipher. I breathed in deeply, tasting the metallic tang of fear still lingering in the air, and tried to shove the memory of that figure from my mind. Desperate to break free from this nightmare, I shoved the panic down and grabbed my phone, fumbling for the flashlight app. Light flickered reluctantly to life, casting a thin beam into the inky void ahead. The shadows receded, but it was only temporary. They lurked at the edges of my vision, waiting, taunting. With each step deeper into the cave, I noticed strange markings etched into the walls, symbols that flickered like whispers in the back of my mind. They pulsed with a rhythm that made my heart race, resonating with an energy I couldn't explain. Were they warnings or invitations? The whispers came again, louder this time, indistinguishable voices cascading over one another like a grotesque symphony. "Join us, stay with us." I stumbled toward a narrow passage, hesitating before I pushed deeper into the cave's maw. The chill intensified as I crossed the threshold, and the whispers morphed into guttural noises that reverberated in my skull. My skin prickled, and I felt something brushing against me, brushing too close. I swung the flashlight around, the beam piercing through the darkness, but found nothing but cold stone and shadows. Still, the faint sensation of warm breath trailed along the nape of my neck. The cave twisted and turned, and I wished I had turned back at the first moment of doubt that crept in. I was no longer just filled with fear. Something primal urged me to flee, to escape the unseen horror that haunted these walls. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, drowning out the insidious whispers threatening to consume me. They grew louder, a cacophonous chant rising in intensity. Gritting my teeth, I pressed forward, the beam of light revealing an opening up ahead. Could it be an exit? Light! Hope surged through my chest. But as I approached, that flickering light morphed into a grotesque figure sprawled across the ground, skin pale and splotched, eyes hollow yet aflame with a manic intensity. Something stilled in my chest as I frantically shone my light. I wasn't prepared for the sight of a face I recognized. It was my brother, long since missing. His mouth twisted into a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Help me!" His voice was a raspy whisper, echoing the words of the cave as if drawn from the same spectral chorus. My body screamed to run, but I felt rooted to the spot, horror anchoring my feet. "What happened to you?" I gasped, voice cracking at the edges. I stepped closer, torchlight revealing countless scratches along his arms, marking the very essence of despair. "Stay," he replied, an unnatural cheerfulness underscoring the tragedy that enveloped him. "It's not so bad, we can finally be together again." The darkness around him shimmered, alive, shapes began to swirl and take form, whispering in a language I had long forgotten. Figures of anguish and despair emerged, their ethereal silhouettes reaching for me, wailing with voices that tore at the very fabric of my sanity. They demanded me, beckoning me to join the crowd of the lost. A surge of adrenaline broke through the haze of fear. I stumbled back, my body screaming for freedom. The walls pulsed around me, squeezing me in a vice. I turned to flee, the sinister figures dissolving into the shadows. But as I dashed away, the ground beneath me buckled. I caught my breath as the cave chasm threatened to swallow me whole, dark energy surging upwards, the cries of tormented souls collapsing in a stampede of echoes. I turned, just one last look, and there they were, shadows massing behind me, my brother at their head, eyes burning like embers in a storm ready to swallow me alive, and then I could feel it. The ground beneath me gave way, a fierce hunger surging as the darkness rushed forward to drag me down. Just before everything went black, I caught a final glimpse of those flickering eyes staring into my soul, a promise of eternal darkness waiting to welcome me. I gasped, jolting awake in a damp, claustrophobic space. The air felt thick, heavy with despair and something else, a palpable darkness that seemed to wrap around me like an embrace from the coldest corners of hell. Panic surged through my veins, coursing faster than before. My limbs felt leaden, and I struggled to process the reality around me. I was back on the cave floor, the chill biting into my skin anew, yet I was alone for now. My phone lay beside me, emitting a soft, flickering glow. I grabbed it, the light casting long shadows that writhed at the edges of my vision, like tendrils of darkness waiting for the moment of weakness. Shivering, I flicked the flashlight back on, its weak beam barely penetrating the suffocating gloom. "Where am I?" My voice was an echo, swallowed by the walls that seemed to lean in closer as if eager to hear my fear. I stood cautiously, the slippery rocks beneath me reminding me that any moment I could lose my footing and descend into the abyss of oblivion. A soft rustle caught my attention. Was it merely the cave settling, or something else lurking just beyond the reach of light? Every instinct screamed at me to bolt, but I was paralyzed by a raw, consuming dread. I took a tentative step, the sounds of waves crashing echoed faintly in the distance, mixing with an eerie symphony of whispers that danced at the back of my mind. They were no longer incomprehensible, they beckoned, enticing and mischievous. Follow, they urged in a chorus, seductive and sinister. A shiver traveled down my spine, colder than the cave's temperature as I thought of the shadows I had just escaped. I pressed forward, drawn, yet terrified. The cave opened into a wider chamber, the walls sparkling with bioluminescent fungi that glowed sickly greens and blues. Strange motifs swirled, and the air hung thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, a fetid odor that churned my stomach. That I gasped again, involuntarily stepping back as the fungi shifted and pulsed in rhythm, syncopated with my own racing heart. Reflecting my own desperation, the glowing forms cascaded in and out of focus. There, at the center of it all, stood an altar, its surface slick with dark stains that glimmered as if impossibly alive. Someone had been here long before me. What is this place? I muttered, inching closer warily. The shadows deepened, and with them, I felt a heavy presence looming behind me, the kind that steals the breath from your lungs. I spun around, weaponizing the light of my phone against the looming darkness, sweat breaking on my brow. At the edge of the beam, I saw something shift, something with a shape too shapeless to be real. A figure, formless but distinctly there, loomed, eyes glimmering like shards of mirror, reflecting my terror back to me. I could feel it reaching out, not to grasp me, but to pull me into its very essence, to consume my fears and my sanity. Join us, it whispered, voice a guttural mimicking of my own brother's, but laced with that familiar cheerlessness. My throat went dry as recognition coursed through me. The wraith was calling for me, calling for more than mere companionship. It wanted to fill the void left by the souls forever trapped within these walls, in the mouths of darkness and despair that wove a web I was inching closer to. No! I shouted, the defiance felt hollow and fleeting. I stepped back, feeling the altar's pull, its dark essence curling like smoke around my ankles. I felt the cold palpating of uncertainty roiling in my stomach, urging me to take flight, but in my heart, a trepidation anchored me deeper into the cavern's spine. That I turned to bolt for the passage from which I had come, but the shadows reared up. They surged forward, and I stumbled, my foot catching on something sharp and unyielding. I fell, my flashlight skittering away and extinguishing itself, plunging me into a profound abyss. The whispers erupted around me, shrill and desperate. Stay, stay, they cried, an urgent plea from voices overlapping, a haunting hymn echoing through the cave. In that pitch black, I felt fingers trailing along my spine, a chill that clung to me, and the sheer terror of losing myself to whatever enchantment lay in these caverns clawed through me. I gritted my teeth, fighting the waves of darkness pressing against my mind. Just before I could regain control, a chilling silence fell, nothing but the sound of my staccato breaths reverberating in the void, and then the light flickered back on, no longer mine, but from behind the altar. It cast waves of luminescence forth, revealing a doorway I hadn't noticed before, framed in shadows, whispering promises of sanctuary and horror alike. As I struggled against my rising dread, the shadows beckoned once more, swirling to form a dark silhouette, the unmistakable outline of my brother, but now much more. Come home, little sister, he intoned, his voice drenched in honeyed malice, stretching a hand toward me, a hand that shimmered and disintegrated with every heartbeat that I in that moment, with the ink of despair closing in, I realized. The choice was made, for Meth Cave would not let me leave. The door behind the altar loomed larger, shadows shifting around it like a painted curtain barely held in place. My breath caught as my brother's phantom shimmered in the glow of the doorway, eyes bright with an intensity that drained the warmth from the room. With each pulse of the light, his visage warped, leaking from flesh into fluid mosaic, a tapestry of sorrow stitched together with threads of darkness. Home? I rasped, incredulity splintering through the haze of my terror. You're not him, you're not, join us. The echo of 1,000 voices mingled with his as if the very walls themselves sought to participate in this betrayal. The cave knows it understands us. You're not alone anymore, every instinct screamed at me to flee, yet their siren song wrapped around my heart, threading through every doubt and despair I had buried deep. I teetered on that terrible precipice, feeling the massive weight of whatever monstrous spirit lurked behind me coiling closer, waiting for an opening, a moment of weakness to strike. No. I shouted and whipped around, hands trembling, searching the darkness. What do you want from me? I wanted to sound defiant, to reclaim my agency, but the plea fizzled into a whisper, lost in the mess of voices inviting me home. The altar shifted, groaning in such a way that made my heart leap into my throat. A sense of misplaced nostalgia washed over me, sending a flood of memories cascading into consciousness, every ghost, every regret, every loving word spoken too late. I lumbered backward, pinching my arm to bring myself back to reality, feeling the bruising sting under my skin. Forget the pain, my brother's image cooed, now a tendril of shimmering inky darkness that reached for me, beckoning with familiarity and absolute malevolence, but the cave was no home. It was a tomb, one filled with twisted sentiments that wrapped around my heart like chains, a psychic prison forged from desires that could never be fulfilled. I twisted to run toward the passage, but the shadows surged again, forming a wall, pulsating with the beat of anguished hearts. They knew how to scare me into compliance that I flailed, the ground churned to a sickening shift beneath me, and I felt the walls vibrating, their existence singing with malevolence. Panic surged anew when I realized they were closing in. My breath quickened as desperation gripped me. I had to escape. The cloak of shadow fell, tracking my movements, but beneath it, something else stirred. At the edge of my vision, I glimpsed forms swirling, a myriad of faces twisted in agony, eternally trapped in darkness. They reached out, their mouths moving, but only the whispers of laughter and despair clawed through my ears. They were condemning me to share their fate. Help us, one voice echoed, raw and pleadful. We can save you. You belong with us. Forever, never. I cried, throwing myself toward the doorway. But as I grasped the altar's surface, ice-cold energy flooded my fingers, binding my skin with an unyielding grip. I yanked back in horror, the energy blooming into a million pinpricks that shot through my veins like fire. Suddenly, the brightness at the doorway flickered, the light wavering as though it might extinguish at any moment. I could feel the presence behind me, its weight pressing down like a heavy blanket that suffocated hope. My brother's visage turned distorted again, fading and reforming as if caught between realms. Stay! He commanded as the altar shuddered, the whispers rising to a fever pitch, morphing into a cacophony that roared through the chamber. In that moment, a single, distinct voice broke through, the Dina voice as familiar as my own, yet tainted by the sound of twisted delight. Embrace your destiny. With a final surge of resolve, I snatched my foot free from the cave's grasp, my heart hammering wildly in my chest. I spun around, the light flickering and dimming as I bolted from the altar. Taste the coal of darkness scraping my throat. I felt the overwhelming urge to scream, but something dark underlined my breath, reminding me of every awful secret lurking in my soul that I reached. The stone passageway, clawing at the blackness that edged against me, tropes of despair clawing at my soul, demanding that I halt the escape. Just as I burst through the entrance, gasping at the sudden stillness outside, the ground trembled, rocks shifting and crumbling around me. From behind me, the inky shadows merged, taking form, coiling deliberately as my brother's voice echoed one last time, "You can never leave." A rush of wind raced through the tunnel, forcing my feet out from beneath me, tossing me to the cave floor. I landed hard, the world spinning as a chilling laughter echoed through the cavern, a joyous cackle of triumph mingled with the sounds of weeping souls. And in that moment, just as I looked up in horrific realization, every face that had trapped me within their torment emerged from the shadows, eyes vacant yet alive with a hunger for belonging, for revenge. The cave groaned and shifted one last time. I felt the very ground open beneath me, dark tendrils reaching up, pulling me downward into an abyss, and in that instant, with a heart teetering on the brink of oblivion, I knew, choice no longer belonged to me. Then, as the darkness enveloped, a final echo of my brother's voice whispered through the chaos, a promise laced with the darkest intent: "Welcome home." The abyss swallowed my scream. I could feel the cave's cold breath rising around me as I was pulled into the depths of its insatiable hunger. Time elongated in that confounding darkness. The ground beneath me shifted, a liquid blackness that grasped at my limbs, trying to pull me deeper into its abyssal embrace. As I sank, the weight of despair settled upon my shoulders like a cloak sewn from shadows. I thought of my brother, of all the promises unfulfilled, and I wondered if this fate was indeed our destiny intertwined. Then, just as panic threatened to consume me entirely, the earth solidified. I landed hard on a surface that felt almost human, the sensation chilling my spine, and I scrabbled to stand. Dread coiled in my gut as I took in my surroundings. I was no longer in the altar's sacred embrace, but rather a vast chamber, illuminated by a flickering light that cast sinister silhouettes against the rough stone. The air was thick, charged with a force palpable enough that I could feel its pulse against my skin. It felt wrong, an electric hum of anticipation that sent shivers racing down my arms. And then I heard its muffled cries, echoing like a mournful choir. I followed the sound, heart racing, pushing downward through a narrow tunnel that exuded a sickening dampness. With every step, the cries grew louder, more insistent. "Help us! Help us," they begged, a chorus spiraling into a rhythmic chant that clawed at my sanity. It was then that I realized they weren't merely begging for release, they were beckoning me to join their wretched ranks. That I stumbled into a large cavern, its ceiling lost to shadow, while illuminated patches on the ground revealed an intricate arrangement of bones. At once, I understood, this was not a sanctuary but a graveyard, a monument to the lost souls who had once wandered these cursed halls, and among them, I saw her a flicker of light crackling near the back of the chamber. A figure, crouched and trembling, the face obscured by long hair that hung like tangled strands of web across strong features. I felt a pang of recognition ache in my chest. It reminded me of someone I had loved dearly, someone whom I had lost. "Please, don't come any closer," she rasped, her voice a fragile thread woven into the fabric of despair that enveloped us. I hesitated, overwhelmed with a mix of hope and horror. "Are you?" I breathed, my voice barely a whisper. "Don't!" she cried, and in that moment, a shadow shifted behind her. It slithered across the remains of those who had come before us, manifesting into a twisted mass of torment, a creature architected from every repressed fear, every lost hope. It loomed taller, grotesquely broad, its essence an amalgamation of the lost faces I had seen earlier, each mask beckoning, each mouth smiling and weeping in a horrific symphony. "Join them," the creature sang softly, the melody both mesmerizing and terrifying, its voice the echo of all who had perished in this wretched place. "Find solace among your kin, as I have." The figure before me turned, revealing eyes glinting with desperation. "No. Don't listen. It's a trick. I tried to escape, I tried. But it won't let you go. You'll become one of them, one of the forgotten. Why should I believe you?" I shouted, panic surging through my veins as the black mass continued to writhe and undulate, painting the ground with shadows that danced hungrily. "Because I'm the only one left," she cried, her voice breaking into a scream that echoed and reverberated off the stone walls, drowning out the creature's sinister call. "They will feast on you. They crave your essence." As if responding to her words, the creature surged forward, tendrils reaching with desperate hunger. I felt it tugging at my very being, a pull that resonated through my bones. I took a step back, but I was cornered, trapped between the living nightmare and the spectral chorus yearning for salvation. "Run," she implored, tears streaking down her grime-smeared face. "You have to act. It senses your fear. It will consume you if you stay. Move." Before I could respond, a blinding light exploded from the chamber's depths, shattering the shadows momentarily and forcing the creature back, shrieking in a cacophony of dismay. I gasped. Was it hope or merely a trick of the cave? The ground trembled violently as the light flickered again, pulsating like a heartbeat, igniting every bone in the chamber with a fierce luminescence. I glanced back at the figure. She was beckoning me urgently. "Go. "I'll hold it, just go." Hesitation gripped me. But in an instant, the creature recoiled as my instincts roared through me, and I grasped whatever courage I had left. I turned and dashed toward the crossroad illuminated by that strange glow, the nimble darkness at my heels clawing at the hem of my sanity, and just as I thought I had eluded its grasp, I heard a whisper in my ear so chilling, it froze my veins, "You can never leave." I screeched to a halt, horror crashing over me as two icy hands snagged my shoulders and spun me around. The darkness surged. A guttural laughter filled the chamber, a horrible serenade echoed from every corner as the light dimmed. But the last thing I saw, as the shadows closed in, was her face pale, eyes wide with terror as she cried out, "No! It's too late." Then all went black. I woke with a start, the taste of iron heavy on my tongue, bitter and metallic. My heart thudded against my ribs, a desperate drumbeat fighting against the fog suffocating my mind. I blinked, squinting into the dimness that surrounded me. Panic welled up as I recognized where I was not in the sanctuary of light I had fled towards but instead lying on a cold stone floor, drenched in the same insidious darkness that had engulfed the chamber before. The air felt thicker now, almost gelatinous as my breath escaped in ragged gasps. A low, rhythmic sound droned in the background, syncopated like the chanting I had heard earlier, a sinister chorus that ebbed and flowed as though the cave itself were mocking me. I pushed myself up, glancing around for any sign of the girl or the wretched creature that had chased me. Shadows clung to the walls, merging into grotesque shapes that vanished whenever I shifted my gaze, leaving just flickers of movement, just out of reach of my perception. "Hello?" I croaked, my voice breaking against the oppressive silence that followed. No reply came, only the echo of my own fear bouncing back to me. I strained to hear beyond the sound of my own heart, listening for the whispers of the lost, but all that met my straining ears was the low hum of the dark. I stood shakily, searching the chamber for any means of escape. The cavern loomed around me, yawning like a mouth ready to swallow me whole. I could see nothing past a few feet, the shadows were impenetrable, hungry. A skittering sound jolted my senses. I turned, muscles tense. From the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement caught my attention, a scuttling figure, low to the ground, retreating into the shadows. "Hello?" I called again, taking a tentative step forward, then I saw the remains of what seemed like a figure, skeletal and twisted. Its limbs elongated into grotesque angles, and my stomach churned as I recognized the remnants of flesh still clinging to its form, pale and horrifyingly real. My pulse quickened, and dread clawed its way up my throat. I stumbled backward, colliding with the cold stone wall behind me. The knotted fingers of the dead reached out, almost grasping its hollow eye socket seemed to glimmer with a terrible light, a reflection of my own horror. I could barely turn away when an unexpected noise broke through the stillness, a whisper that slithered into my ears like sandpaper, rasping, "Join us." Stay. Suddenly, countless voices filled the air, overlapping each other in a cacophony of pleas and curses. The air vibrated with their cries, twisting my sanity like a fragile thread at the end of a fraying spool. "We are waiting. Do you wish to belong? Come to our embrace. Shut up. Get away from me." I screamed, instinctively pressing my palms against my ears. As I did, the darkness thickened, pooling around my feet like a puddle of oil. It sucked hungrily at my extremities, pulling me down. I fought it, kicking and thrashing, but it only clung tighter, a vice of despair. I in the chaos, the ground trembled once more, not from rage, but from something more insidious. The sound beneath me grew louder, a low growl vibrating through the stone, a warning that sent spiderwebs of ice crawling down my spine. The shadows began to pulse rhythmically, and with each cycle, their forms shifted, intertwining and solidifying into forms that bore the faces of the lost. I staggered backward, desperate to escape this haunted gallery of torment. That's when I spotted an archway, faintly illuminated by a pulse of pale blue light filtering through the shadows. Instinct screamed in me. I dashed toward it, fueled by the survival instinct flooding my body with adrenaline, but as I neared, a sensation gripped my heart, a presence, dark and overpowering, slid just past my shoulder. I glanced back, and for an eternal moment, Time held still as the creature's face came into view, a sight I had feared yet longed to forget. Its visage was wrought from nightmares, every lost and pleading face twisted into a malevolent grin. Blackened eyes boring into my soul, it leaned closer, exhaling a fetid breath that carried the scent of decay. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound escaped. Leave your brother. Leave your past. Embrace your fate, it hissed, and I knew then that this was not merely a creature of shadow, but the embodiment of every fear and regret I had ever harbored. I was being consumed, not just captured physically, but devoured piece by piece, a dark meal for the souls trapped within. A shriek tore through my throat, reverberating off the stone walls, rising above the cries demanding my submission. And then the chamber erupted into chaos. The shadows writhed and stretched, tearing at one another, blurring the lines between the past and present. In a moment of pure instinct, I lunged for the archway. As I dove through, the world behind me erupted in sound, a hellish symphony of despair, muffled cries, and shadows roaring. My body collided with the hard ground on the other side. I gasped for air, with no moment to collect myself, every instinct urging me onward, but as I stood, the light shifted, revealing an endless tunnel, a new path twisting into the black void. Heart pounding, I heard a panting breath behind me, raspy but familiar. It was almost identical to my own, and as I turned slowly, a sense of dread drained into my bones. There, looming in the entrance of the shadowed archway I had barely escaped, stood the twisted figure of my brother. His face was contorted in anguish, eyes hollow and devoid of the warmth I once knew, a blurred reflection that twisted my heart into knots. Help, he rasped, with the echo of the damned crystallizing behind him. Join us. The darkness surged again, seeping from the depths as the creature merged once more with the shadows, and with my brother's voice lacing through the air, the walls around us pulsed with a dark hunger that was unmistakably alive. I wanted to scream, but all that came was silence. And as I stood paralyzed by dread, the chilling realization settled in. I had entered the cave to save him, but now, I might be the one trapped. Don't leave me, he whispered, reaching out with a hand that seemed impossibly close yet bore the weight of eternity. And as I took a single trembling step back, darkness lashed out its tendrils, snatching at my ankles like the fingers of the damned, and all I could think was that there was no escape from the family we had become. I felt the darkness tug at my essence, like a deep-rooted fear reborn to consume me. Every heartbeat echoed in the hollow depths of the cave, a foreboding metronome ticking away my unraveling. My brother's form shimmered uncertainly between the realm of the living and the abyss, his voice nothing more than an echo of its former warmth. Help! The word curled around me, wrapping tighter than the shadows that pulsed all around. I could hardly recognize him. His features, once familiar, were now grotesque sketches molded by pain and madness. I wanted to run, but the weight of his gaze bore down on me, pulling at the very threads of my soul. I am here. I shouted, the panic bubbling within me. The shadows replied with a low, rumbling growl, rebuking my plea. He stepped forward, his movements jerky and unnatural. Join us. The words dripped with an otherworldly cadence, filling my ears with syrupy resonance. It was like an incantation, a spell designed to ensnare those who still thought they could escape. The space surrounding us felt as if it were collapsing inward, squeezing the light from the air like a dying star. Please. I just want to help you. I cried out, desperation clawing at my throat. Each word sparked something in him as his eyes flickered, a tempest of anger and sorrow surging in the void. The shadows danced to life, swirling like storm clouds above my head. They'll take you to the pit, he rasped, his voice a chorus of warnings interlaced with despair. The depths draw you and they will strip you bare and bury you beneath their weight of memories. They will become you. The air thickened with the stench of rot as the shadows whispered promises of belonging, of dark acceptance, while flickering forms danced just out of reach. Shapes emerged from the gloom, former versions of myself, twisted and elongated, mouths contorted in silent screams, their eyes pleading for release from the torment. I stepped backward, drawn away from the Visione. A stark realization struck me. You don't belong to them, and neither do I. My defiance echoed, but it trembled under the weight of grief, slowly fracturing around the edges. Suddenly, I felt it an icy tugging at my ankle, sharp claws digging into my skin. I fell, crashing to the ground, and as I turned, shadows wrapped around me like serpentine vines, coiling tighter, denying me movement. "Help me!" My cry became a shriek, ripping through the suffocating silence as I looked back at my brother. A flicker of recognition flared in his hollow eyes. "Fight it!" I gasped, my heart racing, scrambling to break free. He hesitated, confusion battling against the monstrous urges consuming him. The darkness grew eager, hungry for the breach in his resolve. But the tendrils of the shadows did not relent, they dragged me closer to the heart of the cave, hungry for my warmth, for my memories. The ground beneath me seemed to pulse, a grotesque heartbeat matching the sinister chorus surrounding us. "Join the lost," they chanted, chorusing in dissonance as they pulled me toward an aperture I couldn't discern. It felt like a mouth gaping wide, eager to swallow me whole. "Choose." My brother cried, a searing desperation clawing through the space between us. The bonds of blood or the chains of the damned, their cries rattled in my ears, melding with his voice. I saw faces rise from the shadows, almost recognizable figures of those who had loved me, locked within the confines of their own regrets, souls eternally entwined with the macabre remains of what could have been. They beckoned, seeking solace even as they tore at the very fabric of my sanity. "Stop!" I shouted, and in that moment of sheer will, I fought against the grasp of the darkness, clawed against the gloom threatening to engulf me. But with every ounce of strength I summoned, the shadows pushed back, the grotesque forms growing arms and leaping towards me, eager to consume my light. "Help me!" The desperation broke through my terror as I reached for my brother's gnarled hand. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes, just as the shadows surged forward. With ferocity unparalleled. We locked eyes, fear intertwined with unspoken memories of laughter, warmth, and love. For a split moment, I felt a fleeting connection, the faintest echo of who he had been. Time stood still as I willed him to remember to break free from the darkness holding him captive. But just then, a piercing scream erupted from the depths of the void, shattering our moment with shards of horror. The shadows swarmed around us, and the walls of the cave trembled. The ancient stone reverberated with the echoes of torment, the anguished wails winding into a crescendo that threatened to consume the very air. With a final, agonizing lunge, I grasped his hand, but only for an instant. The shadows twisted and snarled, surging toward me as he faltered beneath the weight of their pull. I felt our connection fracture, a sacred bond splitting apart like fragile glass. My brother's scream mingled with the cacophony of tormented souls as darkness swallowed him whole. No. I screamed, flinging myself backward, but as I fell, an unseen force yanked at my ankle with the hunger of barbed tendrils. I was trapped. "Leave before it's too late," my brother's fading voice echoed, the warning swallowed into the cacophony of despair and darkness that threatened to consume me entirely, and just like that, as I clawed against the void surrounding me, battling the tendrils gripping my legs like a vice, the tunnel before me began to morph, twisting into a churning spiral, a whirlpool of shadow and despair threatening to pull me under, and then, as the shadows closed in tighter than I could bear, I felt something shift, a cold realization that the tunnel I had fought so hard to avoid now beckoned me forward with an unsettling allure. I stood at the precipice of a decision that would echo through mortality itself, one that would bind my fate to whatever lay beyond that darkened passage. In a final crescendo of terror, the shadows surged forward, tearing at me, and with an anguished roar, I launched myself into the unknown, uncertain if I would descend into hell or rise anew. But one truth rang clear as the world around me spun. Once I crossed that threshold, there would be no turning back. The moment I entered the spiraling void, time ceased to carry its weight. I was plummeting through an endless abyss, the walls morphing into grotesque faces, each twisted expression screaming in silent agony. The cacophony of voices rose around me, a dreadful symphony of the damned, a chorus of those trapped like my brother, their echoes mingling with the reverberations of my own pulse. "We are waiting," they whispered, a haunting melody that gripped my heart with icy tendrils. As I fell, the very fabric of reality around me began to shift. Shadows reached out with phantom fingers, grazing my skin coldly, their touch inviting and horrific all at once. I felt not just my brother's presence, but the weight of countless souls tugging at my consciousness, trying to communicate, each voice melding into a formless mass of suffering. Then, without warning, I landed violently on a cold, damp surface, a crushing impact that stole the breath from my lungs. Gasping for air, I found myself sprawled on the floor of an expansive cavern, the darkness pressing in on all sides, thicker than it had been before. The air was heavy, saturated with the stench of decay and despair, a morose reminder that I had traversed beyond the boundaries of the mortal realm. As I regained my senses, I fought to stand, the soft ground yielding beneath me like a grave of sighs and whispered regrets. Staggering into the faintly luminous remnants of bioluminescent fungi, I squinted into the shadows ahead. Flickering shapes darted just beyond the edge of visibility, too quick to be human, feral and twisted. They seemed to slink deeper into the darkness, their forms teasing my peripheral vision. "Is anyone here?" I called out, my voice trembling on the chill air. The response was immediate, an echo bounced off the walls, distorting my words into a mockery of their meaning. "Is anyone here?" it taunted back, carrying the weight of 1,000 souls woven into the very stone beneath me. Desperation clawed at my throat as I scanned the cavern, seeking any signs of life or solace from this nightmarish descent. In the far corners, I spotted shapes forming spectral silhouettes whispering urgently at my approach, their features obscured by the shadows. Unidentifiable, yet faintly familiar, they drifted closer, flickering in and out of existence like the dying embers of a fire. "Don't listen," one of them cried, a pitch of panic that sent a shiver spiraling down my spine. "They will devour you like they did us." I felt my heart quicken, the instinctive fear pulsing through me. Who will?" I pleaded, clutching my arms as a frigid draft swept through, chilling me to the bone. "The wraiths of regret," another shape emerged, its voice like the scraping of metal on stone. "They feast on sorrow and despair. They will find your weaknesses, and exploit them." Suddenly, a serpentine glow flickered deep within the cavern, illuminating grotesque carvings etched into the stone. They depicted scenes of anguish, twisted beings mourning endlessly, their faces locked in rictus grins of despair. I moved closer, each step reverberating through the silence, my heartbeat sinking with the horrors unfolding around me. As I traced the imagery with trembling fingers, whispers grew louder, harmonizing into a chant that reverberated through the cavern. You are lost, they echoed, pulling at the threads of my sanity. I flinched, feeling the weight of their despair tower over me, and grasped at my heart as moments of my life appeared before my eyes, regrets, failures, and fractured memories flooding my thoughts unbidden. No. I gasped, clenching my fists. "I won't let you take me." I willed myself to stand against this tide of sorrow, but the darkness gathered strength. The wraiths writhed closer, their forms shimmering in and out of focus, faces twisting into reflections of my own past failures. "You can't escape what you've buried," they hissed, serpentine joy curling in their voices, and just when despair began to meld with the pulse of my heart, their focus shifted, eyes merging into blinding points of light. "She seeks the forgotten," one of them hissed. "We shall show her." At that moment, the ground trembled beneath me, and from the shadows, a path began to unfurl, a walkway of betrayal leading deeper into the unknown. Vile shadows coiled and twisted like ethereal serpents, guiding me to the very depths where the wraiths feasted on the essence of the forsaken. With a sudden burst of determination, I turned away from their beckoning, racing back toward where I had fallen. Shadows lashed out, clawing at my ankles, and I stumbled into the oppressive darkness, desperate to escape. As I neared the edge of the cavern, a thunderous roar erupted from the depths, shaking the ground beneath me. I dared not look back, a silent scream lodged in my throat, as a burst of icy wind swept through the space, snuffing out the periphery of light I had almost reached. Before I could reclaim my momentum, a blinding flash illuminated the Kavisha. Dark figure emerged from the void, its presence emanating an overwhelming hunger. My heart stopped as the shadows parted to reveal a monstrous being, a grotesque parody of a once familiar face twisted beyond recognition. My brother stood before me, his mouth stretched in an inhuman grin, eyes black and hollow, a marionette of malice garbed in the guise of my blood. "You shouldn't have come here," he spoke, but it was not his voice, it was layered with an infernal echo, a choir of the lost intertwined within his words. In that chilling moment, as the wraiths encircled us in a frenzy of anguished cries, I realized with horror was no longer my brother. They had taken him, and now they came for me. "Will you join the feast?" he taunted, a long, sinuous shadow coiling behind him, ready to consume all that I was. I stood frozen, the cavern vibrating with anticipation, a prison of horrors beneath the earth, closing in around me as the darkness surged, ravenous. And as I met my brother's eyes, I felt the final threads of my will begin to fray, the voices of the lost rising to a fever pitch, drowning out my shrieks as they pulled me into their maw.in. That terrifying instant, I knew I would either succumb or fight to reclaim the pieces of my very soul from the forever dark, whatever the cost. But with every heartbeat, I was drawn deeper into my nightmares, my fate hanging precariously as I faced the thing that once was my own flesh and blood, teetering on the brink of oblivion. The shadows pulsed eagerly as I stared into my brother's abyssal eyes, the familiar contours of his face twisted into a shape I no longer recognized. My heart raced, blood pounding in my ears as the cavern closed in around us, ominous whispers echoing the cacophony of the wraiths beyond. "You shouldn't have come here," he repeated, the words curling through the air like smoke, unsettling and cold. The mocking tone, so characteristic of him, sent chills racing down my spine. "You were never meant to be part of this. You could have been free." "Free?" I spat, grappling with rage and sorrow in equal parts. "Free from what? You're not him anymore." A flicker of motion caught my eye. Wraiths skulked in the periphery, their skeletal forms creeping ever closer, drawn by the palpable tension. My brother's smile widened with a hunger that settled like ice in my gut. As he stepped forward, shadows clawed at the ground around him, rising like serpents, bent on weaving a web of despair to ensnare me. "You think you can escape the past?" His voice dipped, dripping with malice. "This darkness is rich, teeming with the stories of those who once lived, those who wished to forget. The wraiths hunger for souls filled with regret, souls like yours." I staggered back, the weight of his accusation hammering in my chest. My mind raced, each memory an anchor pulling me deeper into dread. Regrets I thought buried surfaced, revealing the chasms of decisions long forgotten, shadows of a life I had left behind. "Join us," he urged, outstretched arms betraying an insatiable longing. "You will never be alone again." Sweat beaded on my forehead as the darkness swirled, almost alive, and the wraiths began to chant a low, droning hymn, the sound seeping into my bones. Each note resonated with a truth I couldn't escape, a terrible understanding that they were bound to me, that their pain mirrored my own losses. "Enough!" I shouted, forcing myself to focus. Just beyond where he stood, I glimpsed the unfurling path into the depths, the treacherous aisle that the wraiths had laid out at my feet. Something primal stirred within me, a surge of instinct fighting to reclaim my essence. In that fleeting moment, I turned, and with a rush of adrenaline, lunged toward the path. My mind screamed warnings, yet I pressed forward, my breaths coming in ragged gasps. Just as I reached the edge, the ground shuddered. It felt like the bane of the abyss clung beneath my heels. No. "Don't leave me." My brother's voice fractured, his once warm timbre twisted into something pleading yet desperate, violently lost in despair. The darkness rippled violently as I took the first step on the path. It sprang to life, the shadows rising, creating a ghostly wall that chased after me, blistering my skin with its icy hunger. The wraiths shrieked in agony, their cries mixing with my own as they surged forward, a tide of lament that threatened to drag me back. Suddenly, the cavern erupted into chaos. A cacophony of anguished wails mingled like a storm, each sound clawing at me, desperate to pull me down. I could feel my brother's presence lurking just behind, had shifted, prowling in my wake, taunting, whispering broken promises of protection that sickened me. "You can't escape your choices," he screamed, echoing the despair that permeated the air. "You are one of us now." Reality warped as the darkness chased me, and the only thought clinging to my foggy mind was that I needed freedom, the freedom to break the chains of regret that bound me. My legs pumped harder, the path beneath slick with moisture, but I pressed on, deeper into the unknown. Then, through the chaos, I heard its dreaded chant of the wraiths shifted, morphing into a singular voice, resonant and clear, encircling me like a noose. Follow us. Embrace the darkness. An intense pressure mounted around my chest as if the shadows were trying to draw the breath from my lungs. No! I screamed into the void, spitting the word as if it were a shield. My feet slipped, the ground shifting like water, and I felt the lip of the path give way, with a terrifying lurch. I was flung off balance. I grasped at the knife-edged walls around me as I fell, fingers scraping against cold stone, desperately trying to find a hold. But the shadows erupted closer, fevered hands grasping for my very essence. Then I glimpsed a swirling vortex of darkness in the center, a heart of the void where all paths converged. The hunger of the wraiths surged around it like a violent storm, their faces a chorus of torment. Screams rose, and I understood this was their eternal prison, an expanse where regrets and sorrows amalgamated without end. In the very moment I thought all hope was lost, chains of light surged from my heart, igniting the darkest corners of the cavern. Perhaps it was the essence of my purpose, or a desperate plea for survival, but it coalesced into a blinding sphere, a flicker of the living world spilling into the void. As the light fought against the encroaching darkness, I felt around me the anchors of those lost seeking release, their suffering mingling with mine, igniting a rage I had not known I possessed. But just as the radiance surged forth, shattering the grip of despair, I felt something breathe against my neck, a chilling whisper, clawing at the edge of my sanity. Embrace what you have lost or join us and forget. With that, the world beyond contorted violently, and the light sputtered like a dying ember, leaving me standing on the precipice of oblivion, caught in the tightening grip of shadows. The last remnant of my brother's silhouette vanished beneath the onslaught of wraiths at that moment, and the cavern shook with their unholy wails. The finality of their call echoed in my mind as they surged forward, a wave of bittersweet torments, time suspended on the brink of annihilation, and with my resolve shattered, the darkness lunged as the last trace of light flickered and died, plunging me into an unimaginable abyss, whispers wrapping around me. I braced for the inevitable, feeling every sorrow become real, knowing the path laid before me held more horrors than I was prepared to face. I stumbled through that gaping chasm, the darkness clawing eagerly at my clothes, drawing me further into its insidious embrace. The sound of my heart pulsed in rhythm with the shadows dancing along the walls. Just moments ago, I believed I could escape this nightmare, but with every passing second, I felt the cold grip of despair tightening around me like a noose. I was no longer an outsider. The cave had devoured me, body and soul, and now I belonged to its darkest secrets. And then, like a wicked dream materializing, I found myself within an unsettling atrium filled with reflections only they weren't my own. Faces twisted in terror stared back at me from the mirrored surfaces, each more grotesque than the last, all bearing irrefutable sorrow. These were the souls the cave had claimed, their agony resonating within the stone, feeding a hunger that pulsed through the air. I stumbled back, heart racing, gasping in horror. Join us, they whispered in unison, their mouths moving as if they wanted to consume me whole. You will never be alone. But their cries morphed into screams that cascaded through my mind, shaking loose memories of my brother, his laughter, his warmth, all trapped within these walls, forever bound to the darkness that sought my very core. Panic eclipsed my thoughts, sharpening my instincts as I turned to flee, but the shadows writhed with renewed aggression. I felt the weight of countless forgotten souls bearing down, threatening to pull me into their eternal madness. Leave while you still can. A familiar voice cut through the chaos. It was her, the girl I had seen earlier. I whirled around to find her standing there, her face a mask of determination amid the gathering shadows. You're not lost yet. Resist, but it was too late. The cold tendrils reached for me, intertwining with my very essence. Help me. I gasped, the desperation tearing at my throat. The darkness around me howled with delight, hungry for my surrender. Fight with everything you have. She shouted, her eyes wide, pleading with a force that momentarily pierced the weight of despair suffocating me. Remember who you are. Clenching my fists, I drew upon the shards of hope I had buried deep, memories blooming in the confines of my thoughts. I thought of laughter that buoyed the heart and moments of pure joy. I thought of forgotten promises churning in the abyss, of my brother's warm embrace, now twisted by regret and loss. As darkness closed in around me, I screamed, "No! I will not be consumed." The very air shimmered light I had conjured surged within, battling against the ancient whispers. I remembered my brother, not as he was twisted by the cave but as the boy who raced me through fields, who had always believed in the impossible. My love for him ignited blazing anger at the vile grip of despair, feeding the incandescent light swelling in my chest. With a roar, I unleashed it, watching it bloom outward in a flare of searing radiance that illuminated the cavern's monstrous gloom. Faces shrank back, and shadows recoiled, overtaken by the brilliance that shattered their hold on me. In that haunting moment, I saw my brother's face illuminated from the depths of darkness where all form bent, revealing the ugly truth of the thing that was using him as a puppet to lure me further into oblivion. He struggled against the chains of the damned, his eyes suffused with a clarity I hadn't seen before. "Sister!" he cried, the rawness of his voice mingling misery with hope. "Fight! Don't let the darkness swallow our love, help me break free." I managed to choke out as the light illuminated us both, binding our souls even at the precipice of destruction. The shadows shrieked, thrashing violently, feeling the encroaching power of my light. The wraiths screamed, their horrid forms bucking, clutching at one another, cursed by the hope I was kindling. "No! You will not take her!" they cried, voices blending into a chant of despair that spanned the cavern. "Embrace the light," my brother urged, struggling to inch away from the black tendrils snaking around him. I watched as the connection between us flared, forged from the memories of our love. My heart raced, fire igniting my veins as I surged forward, breaking through that gaping darkness, reaching for him. "We are stronger than this." In that moment, we locked eyes, and the world around us trembled. I felt the weight of everything we lost, the laughter, the dreams, and I channeled it into one last act of defiance. I rushed toward him, seizing his trembling hand, a thread of brilliance entwining between us. "I will not leave you," I shouted, yanking him toward the unyielding light that blossomed above us, the shadows recoiling like snakes, the wraiths howling in anguished rage. Suddenly, the darkness around us convulsed, and with one blinding flash, the cavern was filled with a radiant explosion, shattering the piercing hold of despair. The howls faded into a profound silence, swallowed by the brilliance of our love, a tidal wave of warmth washing over me, but as the light overwhelmed the night, pain lacerated through me, a physical ache that pulled at my heart. The pressure of too many souls clinging, the beauty and agony interwoven, had unleashed something deeper, a horrifying realization of our fate. In that instant, I understood, even as the darkness dissipated, the cave would always hunger. The souls that once roamed would remain bound, echoes forever lingering, their whispers taunting, promising that darkness is indeed eternal. As the blinding light at birth seeped into my very essence, enveloping me like a long-lost friend, I felt warmth and freedom surge through my veins, and yet, with heavy dread, I knew the truth that we had escaped, but the horror would never be truly extinguished. I and the final echoes of that radiant explosion, a single thought clawed through the last remnants of clarity, chilling my very being: the darkness never truly dies. As we turned to embrace our freedom, that insatiable voice whispered through the remnants of the cave: "You can never leave."